I've said it before, I don't mean to start anything, but when it comes to Marvel versus DC, Marvel's movies are running away with it. And yet the battle might be won, but the war is not over, as DC's animation is leaps and bounds above Marvel's. But really better than? Who cares? They're both awesome, they're both legends. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. I like comics too in real school. Okay, segues aren't my thing. Hey Marlene, good to have you back.
Hey Mike, glad to be back.
And of course I asked Marlene back to once again lend her expertise, because another thing that DC does well is television.
With a string of recent successes like Smallville and Arrow, and upcoming shows like Gotham, Constantine, and Flash, DCTV is on quite a roll.
But let's not forget the decades of television DC put out before now, and those television projects that weren't exactly a success.
So let's talk about them already. That is why I'm here.
This is DCTV, the chronicle of DC television, on a very special episode of Real School. For the longest time, it's been the big three who have led the way in film and comic books, but when it comes to television, Big Blue has always been DC's franchise. In the past 60 years, there's barely been a generation that hasn't grown up with Superman on their television. It really began on the big screen when in the 40s and 50s a series of Superman serials was produced, and it led to George Reeves donning the red cape in Superman and the Mole Men in 1951.
Mole Men was always intended to be a pilot for a TV show, and a year later, The Adventures of Superman was on the air.
The effects were low budget, the footage was reused, and Superman never really fought any major villains, but to many, this wasn't campy. This was the first time we got to see a superhero on our television.
The show lasted until 1958, and was tragically cut short by Reeves' suicide. To this day, it's the second longest running Superman show.
Unfortunately, the legacy the producers left Reeves was not exactly a shining tribute.
In 1958, producers tried the bizarre idea of The Adventures of Super Pup. Yes, a talking super dog played by a little person.
Super Pup didn't make it any further than a pilot, but the producers didn't give up there, as 3 years later, The Adventures of Superboy was in the works, with a teenage Clark Kent, and the first time we would see Lana Lang. While 13 episodes of Superboy was written, once again, it didn't make it past pilot, and the super hits just keep on coming. In 1975, 3 years before we would get Christopher Reeve and his Superman films, we got a musical variety show based on a 1966 Broadway production. And to bookend the Christopher Reeve era, Sal Kine, the producer of those movies, tried Superboy one more time in 1988.
The show lasted 100 episodes, even when some of the main characters were recast. And while the show wasn't the most memorable, it was responsible for the first live-action appearances of iconic supervillains, like Metallo and Bizarro.
It was a 4-year run of Superboy, but as we all know, it wasn't the only modern super success. 1 year later, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, hit prime time on a major network and made Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain household names.
21st century viewers got a darker version of Superboy when in 2001 Smallville reintroduced the mythology for an all-new generation. For better or worse, this was a WB show and focused more on teen drama and romance more often than not.
In an astonishing run that lasted over a decade and 217 episodes, DC superfans got their fill of DC superhero cameos, including Cyborg, Impulse, Green Arrow, Supergirl, and a plethora of supervillains. And yet the other big two never made an appearance. How do you talk about DC television without talking about the Caped Crusader?
Or the dynamic duo? This show will forever be a dichotomy in the annals of history. On one side, it was campy fun enjoyed by millions of people. On the other side,
it was campy fun enjoyed by millions when maybe it shouldn't have been campy at all? I talked about it in my Evolution of the Bat on Film video. Sure, Batman the television show was campy, fun, and miles away from the Dark Knight we know and love, but it did leave its mark.
But when Batman ended its run in 1968, it wouldn't be the last time we saw Bat-related television. Granted, it wasn't really a Batman show, but Birds of Prey brought us a TV version of Oracle, Black Canary, and Huntress. While the creators of the show were close, they never really gave audiences what they wanted.
The sex scene between Batman and Catwoman?
No. They tried to give us strong superheroines, but the show lacked tone and focus, so our superwomen got super lost. One show that definitely had tone and focus was the original Superwoman, Wonder Woman. There was a made-for-TV movie in 1974, but it was the series 1 year later with Linda Carter that made Wonder Woman arguably the biggest superheroine.
That does not forgive producers from trying to relaunch, remake, or reinvent the show in 2011 with producer David E. Kelly of Ally McBeal fame at the helm.
Yeah, that's pretty weak.
And they didn't even have that awesome theme song.
Speaking of weak,
some of these attempts at DC on the small screen weren't even close. Like the pseudo-variety show, Legends of Superheroes in 1979, where camp, music, terrible jokes, and even worse racism was thrown together. Sure, you get a live-action Solomon Grundy and Sinestro, but you also get Ghetto Man. Yeah.
Then there was the made-for-TV movie, Justice League of America in 1997, with flat characters that were nothing like the comic book source material.
The JLA never really seemed to get anything going if it wasn't Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman, until the animated show. But that's another episode.
Whether it was Shazam lasting 28 episodes in 1974, or The Flash's run of 20 episodes in 1990, it just never seemed to be the right place, right time.
And with the Flash show, this was almost immediately following the Burton Batman in theaters. They even brought in Danny Elfman to do the score for Flash, just like Batman.
Even when DC seemed to have a sure thing, TV can be fickle. The cult classic Swamp Thing got 72 episodes between 1990 and 1993, but it isn't exactly well known. And the Smallville spin-off Aquaman couldn't even get past the pilot.
With Arrow going strong into its 3rd season, I think it's great that DC's television is going strong as well, and trying new things.
Right, like Constantine. As someone who enjoyed Keanu Reeves' interpretation of the character in the movie, I'm even more excited now that they seem to be actually using the character as he's supposed to look and behave from Hellblazer.
And I personally can't wait for Gotham, a darker, grittier Batman universe on the small screen, and loaded with fan-favorite characters. Sign me up twice for this show. I also cannot wait for the next time I get to do a collaboration with the lovely and knowledgeable I Like Comics Too. So Marlene, thanks once again.
Aw, thank you, Mike! And if you guys want to see any more about my thoughts on movies, TV, comic books, or convention coverage, even toys sometimes, go ahead and check out my channel at youtube.com/ILikeComics2.
But before you go, make sure you answer the poll question. What has been your favorite DC television show? As always, leave your answers in the comment section below. But until next time, School's out.